The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Was it coffee, tea, and spiked soda on MJ Air, or was it just a flight from hell? Hello, I'm James Curtis, and welcome to E's exclusive coverage of the Michael Jackson trial. As Jackson arrived outside the courthouse on yet another beautiful spring day here in Southern California, he seemed to be in a playful and upbeat mood, but would that mood change once he got inside that courthouse? As for the flight, passengers were reportedly throwing food, Jesus juice was flowing freely, and the King of Pop was handing out some rather expensive gifts. That's at least how the flight attendant, Cynthia Bell, the witness on the stand now, describes the 5-hour ordeal from Miami, Florida to Santa Barbara, California. Under questioning by Assistant District Attorney Gordon Auchincloss, she told the jury about a style of travel that most of us, except Howard Weitzman, will never experience, and on this flight, we probably wouldn't have wanted to. Here's what happened, according to the courtroom transcripts.
Have you ever met Mr. Jackson outside your role as a server on one of these flights?
No, sir, I have not.
So it would be fair to say you've been always in a role of pleasing Mr. Jackson, pleasing, making sure he's...
Yes, as a cabin attendant.
All right. With that condition, would it be fair to say that you're in a position where you're always concerned about making Mr. Jackson happy?
As a cabin attendant, yes.
Yes, we've got that. Okay.
I'll lose my job over this.
All right. Now, Mr. Mesereau asked you about whether or not Mr. Jackson would sometimes have vodka in a Coke can. Do you recall that portion of your testimony?
Yes, I do.
So,
I do.
You would serve Mr. Jackson mixed alcohol drinks in a Diet Coke can.
Every beverage that was consumed by Mr. Jackson was in a Diet Coke can. That is correct.
And I think you testified that was your idea originally.
That is correct.
Before you came up with this idea, was Mr. Jackson secretive about his drinking?
Objection, leading.
Overruled.
Assumes facts not in evidence.
Overruled, you may answer.
I don't know. The only time I flew him was with Pacific Jet, and...
That's what I'm talking about. When you flew with him on Pacific Jet...
Oh.
Was he open about his drinking on Pacific Jet?
No, sir, he was not.
What makes you say that?
Because I served him out of a blue... It was almost like not a Tupperware thing. I can't describe it. I mean, it was sort of like, it was a cup, but it wasn't transparent. It was sort of a Tupperware.
Plastic cup.
Right.
Plastic cup. There you go. Next, from plastic cups to crystal fluted champagne glasses, but none such for the King of Pop.
Did Mr. Jackson ever object to being served in a plastic cup?
No.
Did he ever object to being served in a Diet Coke can?
No.
Did you believe that that's how he wanted his beverage, his alcoholic beverages served in Diet Coke cans and in this plastic cup when you did so?
I assume that's how he wanted to be served.
And did ExtraJet adopt a policy of having Diet Coke cans of wine available for Mr. Jackson on any flight Mr. Jackson flew on?
Yes, sir.
So even when you weren't flying, he was always served with a Diet Coke can, as far as you know?
Yes, I would give that information to our flight attendants.
So you shared that with other flight attendants at ExtraJet?
That is correct.
Was this information did this information about serving wine in Diet Coke cans ever appear in writing on any ExtraJet manifest or order or anything like that?
No, sir. We signed confidentiality agreements, and that would be something that would fall under a confidentiality agreement.
Okay, speaking of that, the reason you gave for doing this was because you believe that Mr. Jackson wanted to keep his drinking a secret from his children.
Private from his children, yes.
He didn't want his children to know he was drinking.
Yes.
Didn't want his children to know he was drinking. Ricky Kleeman, it seems like a rather reasonable explanation, especially if we're led to believe, as we're led to believe, he's a little nervous when he's in the air. He's not the only one.
Well, precisely correct. In fact, it's not only this flight attendant, but others who have testified that Michael Jackson is a nervous flyer, that as much as he may fly in this private plane or this chartered plane, that he is someone who gets scared when he flies. So
he's not the only one. I got to tell you, I really don't like flying. I do it sort of as a necessary evil, but
That's
every
why
time
you have
that
Diet Coke can.
there you go, exactly. You carry with me all the time, everywhere I go, Howard. But you know, I get nervous. A lot of people do. We fly because we need to for work or whatever the case may be. But flying through that rough air is no fun for anybody.
And you know what's important about this is this Diet Coke can. It turns out there's a very innocent explanation for it, and that's been turned into something very sinister and nefarious by Gavin and his family. But it's yet the first example, probably of many, of something that is innocent that they've turned into something else.
You can make the innocent argument, Sean, but Howard, isn't there? You have to give it at least a little bit to the prosecution with respect to it corroborates the testimony of these two young kids.
No, the only thing it corroborates, which is no secret, is that Michael chooses to hide his drinking from the kids, and he drinks his alcoholic beverages or wine out of a Diet Coke
But don't
can.
we now know and have support for the idea that these kids drank from alcohol from this can?
Absolutely not. That's baloney.
No, and we're going to hear from this witness that she's watching Michael and the kid throughout the entire flight and never sees that.
But these kids talk about in previous testimony drinking from the Coke can and describe the taste, right?
But you really can't get there. Howard is exactly right. Because
Three against one.
Wait. No, because I'll often argue the prosecution side of this case. But there's corroboration and there's not corroboration. And in this case, all it corroborates is that he, Michael Jackson, drinks alcohol out of a Diet Coke can. It does not corroborate that the kids do.
Oh, Ricky, doggone it. You lose an ally. Sean's back, and they're all against me now. Now, as the flight attendant continues, Auchincloss wants to know, is Michael Jackson, as I said just a moment ago, a frightened white-knuckle flyer, or is he just a heavy white wine drinker?
All right. So would anyone on that flight have any way of knowing that there was wine in that Coke can or rum and Coke in that Coke can unless they took a sip of it?
Objection. Calls for speculation. Leading.
Sustained.
Did he ever explain to you why he was hiding the fact that he is a drinker from his children?
Objection. Asked and answered.
Sustained.
On the flight home from Florida.
Uh-huh.
Did Mr. Jackson become intoxicated? Do you understand the question?
I don't. Intoxicated? As in, like, how?
Did he show signs that he was inebriated or signs of showing that he was somebody who had been drinking? Show any physical signs of it?
Yes.
In what way?
Well, he's a very nervous flyer, and he was just a lot more relaxed, but by no means was he drunk. I was more worried about the two girls. I actually stopped pouring them alcohol.
Okay. But didn't you testify in the grand jury that he was intoxicated?
Yes.
This question has got to go to Howard. Howard, and I hope it doesn't get into...
I totally understand it now. No. This goes to the flying under the influence cause of that.
Yes, there it goes, Oh, you kid. Okay, Howard. And I know that this may get very close to attorney-client privilege information. I know you will refuse to answer, and you have representation adequate on both sides.
No privilege as to whether or not he observed Michael Jackson as a drinker.
Well, and that was my question. Do you know, or can you tell us, having represented Michael Jackson in the past, not on this incident, and on this case, whether or not he drinks? I mean, does he like to drink? Does he...
Can I tell you? Yes. Will I tell you? Sure. To the best of my knowledge, I never saw him drink very much at all.
You ever been on a plane with him?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
There's
and no drinking? Now, see, no, wait. He's giving these really short, don't give the interrogator any room or leeway.
Actually,
ever been on a plane with him,
I have never been on a plane with him. Never been on a plane with him. In my presence, I've never seen him drink. Obviously, he could.
All right.
But not in my presence.
Well, you know what's interesting about this, too? There is an underlying attitude in this examination that it's either that he's drinking and getting the kids intoxicated or that somehow he, quote-unquote, has a drinking problem.
Well,
that it sounds like, this is a guy who's just all the time, like, secretly, lapping this stuff up. Whether it's intended that way or not. But this is a woman as a witness who is not going to bite.
Yeah, I don't think so. But Sean, do you agree with that? I don't necessarily take that spin on it, that he has a drinking problem.
No, I didn't take that spin at all. My husband actually is a background singer for Michael Jackson for many, many years and has flown with him on many occasions.
Oh, we exposed yet another bias. Hello.
I asked him about the drinking, and he said he'd never seen Michael drinking.
Okay, I want to interrogate him myself, just like I did Howard a minute ago, even though I think Howard won that round again. When we return, a sleeping doctor and weapons of mass consumption. Stay with us.
The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. In recent testimony from comedians and comedy club owners, at least one, we've heard the young accuser talked about in some fairly positive, even glowing terms at times. But when answering questions from the assistant district attorney, Gordon Auchincloss, the flight attendant, Cynthia Bell, seems to be describing an entirely different child. According to the courtroom transcripts, here's what she told the jurors about the now infamous trip from Miami.
All right. And on this flight home, you noticed that this young boy, Gavin, we've called him, you know who I'm talking about.
Yes, sir.
You said that he was acting weird.
Yes, sir.
What? Tell me a little bit about that. When was the first time you noticed that he did something that seemed weird to you?
Well, he was just incredibly rude, and I find that behavior unintelligent and strange.
Okay, my question was, when did you first start noticing that he's not being...
From the very beginning, the originating point of the flight.
As the flight went on, did he become... Well, tell me exactly what happened. What was it that made you say that?
Upon seating himself or situating himself in the cabin, he acted like I was his maid, basically, throwing a book bag at me, and I want this here, I want this there, and just very demanding, just unusually demanding, unusually rude.
Did this behavior get better as the flight went on?
The only time his behavior was acceptable was when he was listening to music.
And next, the flight turns into what sounds like an out-of-control nursery school.
My question is, did his behavior get better, worse, the same? You tell me.
It stayed pretty much the same throughout the flight.
And you said that he was, did you know this young man in any sense from outside the realm of flying this jet?
No, sir. I don't watch TV typically, and
So, did you have any means of gauging whether this boy acted this way normally?
No. I would have no way to gauge his behavior outside of on the aircraft.
You said something about a food fight.
Yes, sir.
The boy was engaged in a food fight.
That is correct.
And who was he engaged in that food fight with?
Primarily with the medical doctor.
And the doctor was fighting back?
Well, the medical doctor was sleeping at first when he flung mashed potatoes at him.
And then what happened?
Then...
It went back and forth.
Right. It was a crowd mentality. Everyone sort of joined in.
More than just the doctor?
The girls. And it became a game, basically, on board.
So it was playful?
The initial flinging of the mashed potatoes, in my opinion, was not playful. Flinging mashed potatoes at a sleeping man?
Okay, it's even got us laughing here, Sean. I mean, it's kind of rude, but apparently it does turn playful. Two things I want to touch on here. It does seem indeed that this woman, this flight attendant, is describing an entirely different kid based on what we heard of the other glowing reviews of his personality and honesty even. No?
Yes, and this rude behavior is also consistent with what we've heard about his disciplinary problems in school. And that refutes the idea that the disciplinary problems occurred after the molestation. But we're now seeing this is who this kid is pre-molestation.
But prosecutors would say, look, he's a kid who's been abused, therefore he's acting out.
Well, you've got more than that, because the prosecution can also say that this was immediately following this weekend in Turnberry in Florida, where the family was spirited away, and they were supposed to watch the Bashir documentary. They didn't watch it, and Michael, according to Starr, was taking Gavin into the bedroom and getting him drunk. So that this aberrant behavior, if it is aberrant, came from this new world of intoxication.
Or perhaps molestation, even though Howard Weitzman, the dates, again, we get back to Sean's favorite topic, the timeline issue, the dates of the alleged molestation come after this flight. Therefore, the acting out wouldn't stem from having been molested, yet there is a bit of an innuendo, if I recall correctly from the testimony, that Michael Jackson takes this young man into a room by himself. I believe that was Starr's testimony.
That's
so there's an innuendo that something happened there, even though it's not charged that way.
I didn't ever take it as an innuendo about molestation. I took it simply that he was taking him there and getting him loaded. You know, that he was getting him drunk. And then he would come out and he would be the kid who was then acting weird and being hyper, and that's according to Starr's testimony. I never took it that he was molesting him in the bedroom.
An objective assessment of this testimony
Oh boy, here we go.
Yes, sir.
is that this witness has no bias at all. Her description totally impeaches the story we were told by the two brothers, Gavin and Starr, that Mr. Jackson was plying Gavin with alcohol, gave him the watch to keep him quiet. Yeah. It changes everything when you listen to this witness story, who has no axe to grind, no bias, and contrary to what some have said, I don't think she appears to be a Michael Jackson supporter. She's just telling the story like it is.
See, every time there's some favorable, let's hold that thought till we get back from this piece. Every time there's a favorable piece of testimony for the defense, it's biased, and I mean, it's unbiased and completely honest. Yeah, well. Next, a poor kid trying to impress and a rich man being generous, or was the bling simply part of somebody's sting?
You mentioned that he was bragging about a watch. Tell me about that.
He came into my galley area requesting an orange soda, Sunkist orange soda, and he had 2 watches on his wrist. He was saying things like, look at what Michael bought me, you know, these are very expensive watches, and he's my best friend, and just...
You didn't like that?
Well, I fly Fortune 500 people. I could care less what your watch costs.
You weren't impressed by his watch?
He just goes on.
Okay, did he mention anything about where he got that watch from?
Well, he did say Michael bought this watch for me, and he'll buy me anything. He was just an odd bird.
Now everything gets a little too touchy-feely, even in that courtroom.
In the grand jury, didn't you say it was possible he was intoxicated?
Anything's possible. It could be possible.
Did you say that?
I wouldn't know how to gauge it because he acted the same throughout the entire trip.
So it could be that he was reacting because he'd been drinking.
Objection, leading and asked and answered.
Sustained.
All right. When Mr. Jackson was seated next to Gavin, was he physically touching him?
Did they have physical contact?
Was he physically touching him in any way?
Yes, at times.
Did Mr. Jackson at times cuddle with Gavin?
I wouldn't say cuddle. He had his arm around him listening to music at times.
So how do you define cuddling?
Cuddling? I guess I'd have to show you.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Okay, so it didn't fit your definition of cuddle, but he did have his arm around him.
At times, yes, sir.
Okay, may I approach the witness,
It's
Your
adorable.
Honor?
You know what happens here? Of course, she is darling. By any look at her and how she talks, and she's just adorable. And she's the perfect person you'd like on a private jet to be serving Fortune 500 people. And Mr. Auchincloss is also quite darling, I say.
Well, he was for a moment there, at least.
And it just had this nice little moment. And it goes back to this part that we talked about yesterday, Howard, about the idea of laughter in the courtroom. Mesereau got some, now Auchincloss gets some, and he gets some with a witness who is not helping him, and yet he becomes the person now who is likable. It was very smart.
Let's explore that for a little while. Howard and Sean, with respect to the whole idea of laughter in the courtroom, we've all been in homicide cases where, on occasion, especially in lengthy trials, something happens and people start laughing to release the tension. How does that play overall? How do jurors take it? Does it still, nonetheless, its appropriateness at the time, come off as inappropriate sometimes?
Well, you know, I don't know if you'll disagree, but it's very difficult, I think, in a serious case representing a defendant charged to allow there to be laughter because you want the jury to know that you consider this very serious.
Exactly.
At the same time, you don't want to come off as, you know, being someone without a sense of humor, but I think you have to strike a balance and make sure that everybody appreciates this is very serious to your client and to you.
Howard?
I'm actually pretty good at this.
You're funny?
In terms...
What, am I funny? No,
eliminating the tension in a courtroom is very important.
Yeah.
Jurors appreciate it. Court staff appreciates it. Everybody involved with the case. And you have to do it. Sometimes it's planned. Sometimes it's like this. This lady throws a line out, and even this young
This
district
hardened
attorney.
defense
It's,
attorney,
you know, it's a
prosecutor that he
That's
is.
right, and it really is good. And I'm just prompted to think about the fact that there was this earlier testimony, right, about that there were no clocks in Neverland and they never knew what time it was. And yet here they're coming across the country, and little Gavin just got a watch.
Good point. Good observation. That's why top 5, right? Top 5 in the country. That's what it was.
I feel
when
like I'm
we
cheating.
return, should the king of pop crack the whip when kids run wild? Stay with us.
The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. On cross-examination of the flight attendant, defense attorney Tom Mesro takes a shot at, who else? The accuser's mother. Here's what the jurors heard according to the courtroom transcripts.
Okay. Gavin's mother was on the plane, was she not?
Yes, she was.
Did you ever see Gavin's mother try to stop his rude behavior?
No.
Did you find that odd?
I found that very odd.
And you did say that his rude behavior began from the moment he got on that plane, correct?
That is correct.
And from the moment Gavin got on that plane, you never saw his mother ever try to stop his rude behavior, correct?
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained.
How soon after Gavin got on that plane did the rude behavior start?
Immediately.
Well, if this witness, the flight attendant Cynthia Ann Bell, is to be believed, you might not want to sit next to this accuser.
And what was the first rude thing he did?
He threw his book bag at me and started ordering me around the cabin as to where he wanted placement of his items.
And how did you respond to that?
Polite and efficiently.
Was his mother near him when he began the rude behavior?
Yes.
And if you recall, where was his mother when Gavin began this rude behavior?
She entered the aircraft behind him.
Was it obvious to you that she could see his rude behavior?
Absolutely.
What's the next rude thing you recall him doing on the plane?
He was just very demanding throughout the entire flight, with wanting to get his needs met. Whether it was, you know, more ice in his orange soda, to no coleslaw on his plate with his chicken, more mashed potatoes. It seemed like nothing. His chicken wasn't warm. I want a side of coleslaw. I don't want it on the same plate. Just unusual things. You can tell that. Like he was a newcomer to these sort of flights. Either you have people who are really polite or lovely, or you have people who are really demanding. And they feel like they need to be that way to make them feel important. I'm not sure why, but he was very demanding throughout the entire flight.
All right, here's my one effort for the day to get an admission out of Sean Chapman Holly. Sean, this conduct, although it looks pretty good for the defense at first blush, this is a rude kid, a kid being demanding, a kid therefore perhaps capable of doing things that aren't very nice, like lying about what happened to him. But isn't it also understandable that, hey, this kid, again, is in a new environment. He's on a plane, a private jet, and he just really doesn't know what to do with himself. It's not necessarily malicious or bad.
You will get no admission from me here, James.
Why am I not surprised? Why am I not surprised?
I'm sorry. I think this fits into the defense theory that these accusations that this child ultimately makes are hatched in part and motivated by the abandonment of Michael Jackson. Here he is on this plane talking about, look at my watch, bring me this, bring me that.
Acting like a
He's
nut.
got this sort of grand superior thing that he's gotten now because of his association with Michael Jackson. When he feels abandoned by Michael Jackson, that then provides the motivation for the plan to be hatched.
But Ricky Kleeman, does the behavior that we're seeing, acting like a spoiled brat, if you will, might argue the defense at the very least, does that necessarily translate into hatching the plan or the plot?
No, of course not. He can act like a spoiled brat at the age of 13. He is a kid who has gone through cancer. He's been a poor kid. We have heard about his environment. And suddenly he is surrounded with all of these riches in this extraordinary environment of flying down to Turnberry and going into this private plane. And so he's acting out. I mean, he's 13, for heaven's sake.
He's 13, for heaven's sakes, Howard. Come on, give it up.
He's lucky he wasn't flying with me. I'll tell you that right
Now that I have no doubt about.
However, it certainly isn't consistent with being intimidated, afraid, dominated by Michael Jackson.
Oh, come on, wait.
There's a big difference between not being consistent with being afraid and being the whole idea that this is a kid who was acting out, perhaps if we want to call him like a spoiled brat, being rude according to the flight attendant, and not wanting to tell someone you've been molested by another man.
A totally different thing, Howard. Come on. Well, you have to concede that at the very least.
First of all, I don't have to concede anything.
Well, I know that, but I
happen to disagree. Secondly, it does also show the mother doesn't really have control over him. And look, here's the bottom line.
True.
It doesn't go to whether or not Michael Jackson later in the period molested him.
Taken, counsel. Am I black and blue yet? I'm just getting beat up and
I'm so
buffeted
trying
by
to
all
protect you.
Yeah, well, I don't need a shield or something right here. Next. Sometimes service with a smile, like I'm trying to do right here, is not as easy as it looks, folks. A programming note. The two girls mentioned in this testimony are the accuser's sister, Davlin, and a friend of the sister.
Did you have your eye on Gavin all the time while he was with the two girls that were drinking?
It was hard not to. He was so demanding.
Did he demand things of you while he was sitting with the girls that were drinking on the divan?
No, he was engaged in a conversation about their shopping trip. And they were talking about going horseback riding at Neverland Ranch when they landed from the flight. They had had plans to go horseback riding or something.
And you saw Gavin talking to them about that?
Yes, sir.
And you saw Gavin talk to them while they were drinking alcohol, right?
That is correct.
Have you told the jury every rude thing you can remember he did?
Well, there were so many. Let's see. Basically, he was just, very demanding when it came to customer service. There was also an incident in the lab where we had ran out of passenger napkins, and he made comments about that. Also, when I did my towel service, which you do continually throughout the flight, apparently his hot. Well, we do cold towels because it was hot in Florida. And then when I served the hot towels, he wasn't rude, but why isn't this cold? Shouldn't it be cold? It's like, no, it's meant to be hot because you're getting ready for your second course. So, just things of that nature.
And how long was this flight?
About 5 hours.
Was he the only rude passenger on the flight?
Yes, sir.
So what he did stands out in your mind very vividly, correct?
It stood out very vividly.
And he didn't know what fork to use, probably, either. Next, does the king of pop prefer original recipe or extra crispy?
Were you the only person on the flight responsible for Mr. Jackson's service?
That is correct.
Okay. You were always on your feet, you said.
Yes, sir.
And you said something that you don't prepare meals on that particular flight?
Mr. Jackson tended to prefer KFC with all the fixings. So we would go get Kentucky Fried Chicken prior. Although the children, I was instructed by the head governess to have chicken breasts. Grilled chicken breasts for them, fruit, a little different fare for the children.
Okay. Now, the prosecutor for the government tried to get you to say that possibly he could have been intoxicated, correct?
Objection argumentative.
Sustained.
You never saw Mr. Jackson drunk on that flight, right?
No, sir.
When you discussed the possibility of being intoxicated, what you were saying was that he calmed down and didn't seem as hyper and nervous as he normally would, correct?
That is correct.
Did you ever see Gavin with his mother?
Together?
Yes.
They came on the aircraft together, yeah.
Did you ever see the mom interacting with Gavin? Excuse me, something in my voice. Pardon me. Did you ever see the mom interacting with Gavin on the flight?
Briefly.
And where, approximately, when was that, if you know?
When she went to the lab, she stood midway. I remember it clearly because she was blocking my aisle. She came out of the lab and was standing here talking to her son.
Did you find it odd that she had very little interaction with her son on the flight?
I did.
All right, Sean Chapman-Holly, now this woman is an expert on maternal interactions. I'm not sure if that's appropriate, but of course I don't want to talk to you about that. Tiger Woods orders, I think, McDonald's after he wins the first Masters. Kentucky Fried Chicken on this flight? Is it just I don't know. He's not young. You can't even give him that excuse.
Michael Jackson is black.
Oh, ouch, ouch. See, Howard and Ricky couldn't say that, but we can.
Okay, but you know what I really liked? I liked that he didn't have Kentucky Fried Chicken for the children, but chicken breasts, grilled chicken breasts for the children. It demonstrates another aspect of Michael Jackson. He cares about the well-being and the health of these children.
Well, he is trying to provide ostensibly some healthier food, but it's still Kentucky Fried Chicken, and we don't want to get in trouble with anybody.
No, he has grilled chicken breasts for the children.
There is something, there really is something seriously that's very odd about this cross-examination, which as I look at it and listen to it now, I thought that Tom Mesereau's theory of the case was that the mother controlled the kids. The mother was really the person who was putting this all in motion. Now we have the cross saying that she has nothing to do with the children on the plane beyond a conversation at the lavatory. So I don't get that theory of the case in this cross.
I think it kind of blends into his theory that these kids run wild. The mother may be the head of the clan, including the father, by the way. I always bring him back in.
Never mind.
Correct. Oh, please.
Yeah. When you say clan, I just have
I can't get away with that, right?
Okay.
But go ahead. I'm sorry. Sorry.
But it does fit in, I think, with the theory that the kids ran wild and she allowed them to run wild, and that's part of what Mesereau has said to date.
And remember, we also have the mother not being at the hospital when he's getting the cancer treatments, and we have the mother allowing him to go sleep in Michael Jackson's room while she's at the ranch.
A continual theme.
Yeah, the mother is
I stand corrected.
Certainly, but not only the continual theme with respect to this particular parent, but now, in light of the judge's ruling, that's going to let these supposed previous bad acts in. What about those parents? When we return, you've heard his name tossed around a lot in previous testimony. Now, the doctor himself is in the house. Stay with us. I'm James Curtis. Join me as E! News puts you in the middle of courtroom action at the Michael Jackson trial. See exclusive reenactments, hear expert analysis, get complete trial coverage.
An E! News presentation of the Michael Jackson trial. Don't miss it. Only on E! Weeknights at 9, 8 Central. Viewer discretion is advised. Witness the testimony. Decide for yourself.
The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. Prosecutors called Dr. Stanley Katz to the witness stand. Stanley Katz, Dr. Katz, is a clinical psychologist, and he interviewed the accuser and his family immediately after these incidents first came to light, but before law enforcement became involved. Under questioning by Assistant District Attorney Ron Zonin, Dr. Katz explains how he became involved in the case in the first place. Here's what happened according to the courtroom transcripts.
You have testified as an expert witness previously, have you not?
Many times.
Do you consider a specialty of your practice dealing with abused children?
One of my specialties, yes.
When you say abused children, do we mean more than sexually abused children?
That's correct.
So what categories of abuse do we deal with in your specialty?
Physical abuse, endangering, neglect, emotional abuse, and sexual abuse.
In this particular case, were you retained by Larry Feldman to do some evaluations?
I was retained by Mr. Feldman to conduct some interviews.
Okay. And what type of interview?
Well, Mr. Feldman came to me and said that...
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
Tell us what your understanding of what you were supposed to be doing was.
My understanding was that I was to interview 3 children regarding allegations that they've been either mistreated, abused, possibly molested, and that they had participated in a television program without their consent, and that there were numerous allegations. He wanted me to help sort it out.
All right. Did you conduct the interviews?
I did.
And the interviews were with which children?
With Gavin, Star, and Davelin.
How many interviews with each of these children?
2 each.
When did these interviews...
No, excuse me. 2 with Gavin, 2 with Star, and 1 with Davelin.
Did you interview their mother as well?
I did.
Interviewed without their consent. Did you catch that? Next, did the accuser have a hidden agenda?
During the course of those interviews, did you discuss with either of the children the possibility of a lawsuit?
I did.
What was the purpose of that discussion?
Objection to the extent it calls for hearsay.
The question was, what was the purpose of the discussion, not what was said, so I'll overrule the objection.
Go ahead.
The purpose was, excuse me, to determine what the children's expectations were for talking to me and what they thought would happen as a result to talking to me.
At the conclusion of all of these interviews, did you contact Child Protective Services or the Department of Child and Family Services in Los Angeles?
I did not personally contact them. However, I did go to the Department of Children and Family Services on June 12, 2003, and made an oral report to the Department of Children and Family Services social workers.
All right. Following that, did you have an interview with Santa Barbara County law enforcement?
The next day I did.
Did they contact you or did you contact them?
They contacted me and left a message, and I returned their call.
I have no further questions.
Ricky Kleeman, and I should clarify, the interview that I was referring to was the interview on television without their consent that this witness testified to just a moment ago, not the interview with him without their consent. But that still seems odd. They're on television, they're talking. How do we get the without their consent part in?
Well, I guess you get it from a lawyer.
Well,
I mean, seriously, because they didn't come up and say, we were interviewed on TV, we were in the Martin Bashir documentary without our consent, or that we were interviewed for a rebuttal video without our consent. They didn't say that. That's a legal phrase.
And I have to tell you, on my trip to Santa Maria to the courthouse, I had an opportunity to see the outtakes of that so-called rebuttal video. Didn't look like any without your consent was going on right there. But Howard, let me shift gears with you. You are our Larry Feldman expert. Give us your insights about what's going on here.
I don't know if Larry would agree with that. Larry's a friend for many, many years, a good lawyer, clearly in the middle of this, got Dr. Katz involved. The motivation has to have been, at least in part, potential lawsuit in the future. And you have a psychiatrist, an expert, who has a mission, and his mission is to help create a scenario that might give rise to a lawsuit.
And it bugs me to no end, and the important question, of course, is will it bug the jury that the cops aren't brought in until, oh, we felt like it. On cross-examination, defense attorney Tom Mesereau is not giving up on the idea of a hidden agenda.
You've been involved in your career in a number of lawsuits involving allegations of child abuse, correct?
That's correct.
How many lawsuits involving allegations of child abuse do you think you've been involved in as a professional psychologist?
In all venues? I mean, you mean family law, criminal?
Sure.
Dependency?
Sure.
A couple thousand, maybe?
And have you been involved as a professional psychologist in any civil lawsuits involving allegations of child abuse where people wanted monetary damages?
Yes.
Okay. And were they primarily in Los Angeles?
Yes.
Are you aware that if a child is abused or claims they were abused, they have until the age of approximately 20 to file a lawsuit?
Yes.
Howard, let me go back to you on that very point. It really is odd to me, and I wonder if it's going to be odd to people who aren't in our business, the business of criminal justice, that is, that the cops aren't brought in, law enforcement isn't brought in, no report is made to any authority, the Department of Social Services or whatever arm they have here in California that deals with kids and being in abuse, until, what, about a month later, according to his testimony?
Well, I don't think that in and of itself is unusual. Many times kids and families go to a therapist and talk these things out, and the law provides that the therapists have to contact law enforcement.
Yeah, but this is a therapist that they were referred to after they see an attorney.
Well, what's unusual here is clearly he doesn't go to law enforcement. He doesn't go to the Department of Social Services. They call him. How do you think they got his name? How do you think he got his number? The only inference is either Mr. Feldman or Mr. Dickerman.
Now, we have that thing in California and a lot of other states, that little pesky provision about mandated reporter. I don't think there's a time limit on that report, though, so I guess 30 days is okay. All right, I'll stop. When we return, the truth, the whole truth, and how in the heck do you know the truth when you see it walking down the street? Stay with us.
The reenactments and commentary in this program may contain frank talk of a sexual nature. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back. Now, deciding who's telling the truth can be a difficult task, even for the best doctors and lawyers, although moms have that secret intuition thing going on. But defense attorney Tom Mesereau wants to know whether Dr. Stanley Katz will go by his own book when he's making that determination. Here's what jurors heard according to the courtroom transcripts.
You published an article called Stop the Witch Hunt for Child Molesters, correct?
That's correct.
In that article, you dealt with your concern about false allegations of child molestation, correct?
Absolutely.
You also published a book called The Codependency Conspiracy, correct?
That's correct.
And you published it with a woman named Amy Liu, correct?
That's correct.
And in that book, you talked about false allegations of child molestation, true?
Yes.
You said that lawyers have told you as many as 40% of child molestation allegations are false, correct?
I'm not sure what context you're talking about, but certainly in certain venues, that is true.
You said that lawyers charged with turning these allegations into convictions estimate that as many as 40% of the accusations are insubstantive, correct?
I assume you're reading from my book.
I am.
Well, I'm not sure what precedes it, but if I said it in my book, I will stand by it that it's true.
And that's a good thing. Next, does the doctor want a second bite from the apple?
You told the jury that you were retained by attorney Larry Feldman in the Jordy case, correct?
That's correct.
That was a lawsuit that attorney Larry Feldman filed against Michael Jackson, correct?
That's correct.
That was in approximately 1992, correct?
Yes.
And you were paid money to work with Mr. Feldman on that case, correct?
Well, I was paid for my time and services, not to work with Mr. Feldman.
But he's the one that got you involved, true?
He's the one that retained me on the case.
Okay. And did he pay you a retainer on that case?
I don't think he paid me a retainer. I think he paid me for the time I spent on the case.
Okay. You've been in contact with him ever since, correct? On a periodic basis?
I don't remember talking to Mr. Feldman. I don't remember talking to him in the last 10 years. I don't think I've been in contact, but I don't recall.
Well, you don't recall?
I don't know if he ever called or I ever ran into him, but I don't remember doing anything professionally with him for the last 10 years.
Okay, I'm not asking if you did something professionally with him.
Contact.
I'm asking if you've had any contact of any kind with him before he referred the to you.
Well, I'm trying to explain that. I have no social relationship with him. I don't go to dinner with him, or I've never been to his house. I don't have lunch with him, dinner with him. I may have had a phone call about something. I may have talked to him in the 10 years, but I don't have any other recollection, though.
Oh, a little squirrely. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But first, Howard, let's go back and go over, just want to make sure I have it clear in my head, the sequence of events that happened that lead up to this individual actually talking to law enforcement. Just go over that again with me.
Well, you do have it very clear in your mind. 2 times. First, when he referred to Los Angeles, the words he used were, "I did not personally contact them."
Right.
Well, obviously, somebody contacted them for him.
And that's the initial contact, before he has any conversation with them.
Correct. So he didn't do what the code provides he should do, which is make the contact. Somebody set it up for him, and I would have loved to cross-examine this witness and asked him who it was, because clearly it was one of the 2 lawyers
And then
involved.
after that, there's a meeting. He actually files, as he says, a verbal report. There's not a meeting. He files the verbal report with the authorities. He goes down there. Then, after that verbal report, there's an actual meeting with law enforcement.
Correct. Well,
with the authorities.
There's 2. Then Santa Barbara County contacts him. How would they get his name and number? Well, we know Mr. Feldman had been cooperating with Mr. Sneddon, so I'm sure one of the lawyers or the district attorney's office greased those.
Perhaps. That's an argument. We'll see. That's the defense line. Let's go to this witness, though, right now. Ricky. Squirrely. Hello.
I love that word. And I think he is, and it's for no reason. You have a psychologist who obviously has a relationship with Larry Feldman. He says, well, I didn't go to dinner with him. I haven't been seen with him. I haven't talked to him. But he has a relationship with other people referred by him. And so what?
Relatives, apparently.
Well, so what? You know, just say it.
Just say it. And he's got his own TV show. Okay, we're not going to hold that against him because we're not.
And, of course, he has the relationship with Larry Feldman from the 1993 incident.
Yes.
And that is of critical importance, I think.
You know, James, there's only one reason he could be so reluctant to
and
be
why
truthful.
might that be?
And the reason is there's something he doesn't want known or said, and at least that's the inference, and it makes him look less than credible.
Yeah, I think it does. It may come back to bite him. We're going to see as his testimony proceeds. It's Cesar Chavez Day. Cesar Chavez, viva la huelga. Today, the court was dark as a result of it being Cesar Chavez, but tomorrow we're going to have plenty of show, plenty to talk about. Tomorrow, 9 p.m., right here on E! Believe me, you do not want to miss it. See ya.